from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast. I am Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, we will talk about Black America and the Republican Party. My special guest on this episode is former Deputy Mayor of Indianapolis, Olgen Williams, former Deputy Mayor of Indianapolis, John Hall, and Pike Township Trustee, Annette Johnson. Stay tuned. This is Reverend Charles Harrison, and welcome to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. And I'm so excited today to have three guests with me as we talk about this subject that sometimes is controversial. We're going to talk about Black America and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. We're going to talk about the history of it and the issues around Republicans and the African American community. My guest today is Annette Johnson, who is the Pike Township Trustee here in Marion County. Also, I have with me is Olgen Williams, who is the former Deputy Mayor of Indianapolis under Mayor Greg Ballard. And I also have with me John Hall, who is also a former Deputy Mayor. Also, John was the field director for Indianapolis for HUD. John and both Olgen have been around a long time here in the city of Indianapolis, and certainly Annette Johnson was born and raised here in Indianapolis. And this is a subject that I really want to talk about. I consider myself kind of a moderate Democrat from Southern Indiana, somewhat conservative down in Southern Indiana, but been a Democrat all of my life. But one of the interesting things that I have noticed, probably, more so I've been aware of in the last, 20 years is this whole concept and view of the Republican Party and particularly blacks who are in the Republican Party, that the Republican Party is viewed by many in the African American community as a racist party, and then those blacks who are part of the Republican Party sometimes are viewed as sellouts to the community, yet they have a more conservative viewpoint on a lot of issues that impact the African American community. So John, can we talk about a little bit about the history of Black America and Republican Party? Because at one time, I recall my grandparents were Republicans, and
That's right.
and then that changed. But can you talk a little bit about the history of that?
Well, the party of Lincoln started African Americans off in the political arena. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and blacks were loyal to the Republican Party for at least the first 20, 30, 40 years. And during Reconstruction, you had 2,000 blacks that were elected nationwide, and you had home ownership, farmland bought up, and this was the period in which blacks began to really stretch out and feel some of the promises of America. Rutherford B. Hayes in 1876 pulled the federal troops who were protecting the ex-slaves in the South, pulled them out, and Jim Crow and a much harder period existed for African Americans. But I want to slip in, and it may come up a little later, Black Republicans were critical, instrumental in the Fair Housing Act, and under Art Fletcher and that Nixon administration, affirmative action went full blown. And so while, yes, everything you just said about Republicans and how we're viewed, Black Republicans and how Black Republicans are viewed, how the Republican Party is viewed, accurate. However, there have been Black Republicans who made a difference. Just like Mayor Williams here when he did his time in office.
You know, one of the issues, and I was asked this just recently by, you know, a candidate who is running for public office, and, you know, I think he was bewildered in the statement that he made, and I may direct this toward Annette Johnson, was that why do black people vote for Democrats in these overwhelming numbers when, you know, from his perspective, the black community has not advanced or they have done a lot for us? And, you know, what some of the things I shared with him, you know, was that, you know, Republican Party cannot just, you know, come to the black community when it's time for an election and, you know, seek out African-American votes. And then we got into some other things that maybe I'll share later. But Annette, talk a little bit about, you know, what is the perception, and you being a Democrat all of your life, you know, why are blacks, you know, committed to the Democratic Party when there are some who feel like that maybe the black community has not benefited as much as they should have, as loyal as we have been, particularly over the last, you know, maybe 40, 50 years?
What a great question, Pastor Harrison, and thank you for this opportunity to be on today. And you know, the way I look at it is it's about loyalty. And I think down through the years, a lot of times our parents have instilled values into us, and we kind of just go the pathway that our parents pretty much mapped out for us. I can relate to that. Like you said, my great-great-grandmother was a Republican, and that was back, you know, in the 30s and 40s and so forth. And as my mom was, you know, came onto the scene, and we had a lot of, I would say, issues with affirmative action and things going on where people were protesting, that pretty much led my mom to be a Democrat. And so, again, that was instilled in me to be a Democrat, as individuals that fight for, you know, what they believe in. And I think that's probably where the Republican Party kind of falls short of. You don't see that particular fight or aggressiveness as far as being out in the community alongside, you know, our African Americans or, you know, Democrats, where you see that in a Democratic Party, not so much with a Republican Party. And I think the Republican Party, they do a good job of, you know, bringing issues to the forefront, but that's as far as it goes. Okay. When you actually, you know, need the votes, you wanted something that we fighting hard for, and it's time to get those particular votes and that support, to me, that's where the Republican Party lacks, you know, the input for the Democratic Party.
Olgen, you had a chance to work under, you know, Mayor Ballard for 8 years. What was the challenges that you had as the deputy mayor under a Republican administration when it came to addressing many of the critical issues that we faced in the black community in Indianapolis? Or were there challenges that you faced?
Thanks, Pastor Harrison. Good to be here with Annette and John. The challenges were for me were politics. Okay. Overall. When I was on the 25th floor, Democrats and Republicans showed up to talk to the mayor. Lawyers from Democrat firms, Republican firms showed up trying to get something. And so the challenge was to try to get the mayor to understand that the politics would kill us. And I told him I wasn't working for a Republican Party. I was working for him. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't know what I am. I think my homie Glenn Howard made me a Republican.
He made you a Republican?
Because I worked with Steve Goldsmith in the community. Okay. When he was the mayor, through some of the programs, although he never did really give us anything, but I think the challenge is politics always. There's good people in both parties, people that care for sure, but when you have low information voters and when certain people play the race card, it affects African American. Because we have this innate thing in us about Jim Crow, Willie Lynch theory, Ku Klux Klan. They're going to put us back on ships and take us back. They play that. They did that with Mayor Ballard. I differ with that. My grandmother, I was in East St. Louis and watching my grandmother watch Eisenhower get nominated, and she loved him. I didn't have a clue. And when I was younger, I was a radical. I wasn't nothing. But when I got involved in the community, I had to work with people, and I worked with Mayor Boyd Peterson just as close as I did with all the other mayors. But I think we have to realize, what are they doing for us as a people? The Republican, black people went to the Democrat Party when Kennedy came in. But they thought Happy Days was going to be here. And when Johnson got in, they started giving out the Great Society money. People just stuck there. And there was a fight with conservatives, physical conservatives about that. And I think it put a bad light on Republicans. They was fighting lots of this stuff. And I think that we just have to know who we voting for and why we voting for them. And let me say this right quick. If you're dealing with 8%, John, of your third graders is below 8%, only one up to the right reading level in the black community. When you're dealing with majority of homicides as teenagers in your community, if you're dealing with these challenges, you see what's happening. You're dealing with the incarceration rate. You deal with all this stuff. You got to look at those parties and see, what are you doing? And then you got to look at those things, as John said. What have you done for us? I've seen more success and more progress for blacks, believe it or not, in America under Republicans since I've been involved in community. More money given to our community, but that means they're all right now. But they did do some stuff, and I like the stuff they did. And I support lots of Democrats in my family. I used to send Julia Carson flowers on her birthday because we was like that. But nevertheless, I think that Annette, I've been knowing her, she's a Democrat. And that's all she is. You're a Democrat. Mm-hmm. I consider us friends. Right, we sat at the table. John's a Republican. I'm a Republican. We friends. As long as we can sit down at the table and figure it out. Right. But until that time, we're going to have a challenge. And one last thing, people have to be informed. Low information voters going to the poll will vote on their feelings and what grandmother voted and still understand this person is not good for your agenda.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. And today we're talking about the issue of Black America and the Republican and Democratic Party. And I have three special guests with me today, Olgen Williams, Annette Johnson, and John Howe. Where did it come from, and how far back does it go, before we get into some issues, that the Republican Party is racist? What has driven that? Why is there the perception that Republicans are racist, which has caused Black America really to put 90-something% of our voting power into Democratic candidates in any given year, whether it be presidential races, congressional races, mayor, city, county council, whatever those issues are. Normally 90-something% of the votes go for Democratic candidates because the perception is that the Republican Party is racist. Is the Republican Party racist?
There have always been factions in the Republican Party since the Civil War. There's been the lily white faction, right? The black and tan faction. That's always been there. I think that Republicans are skilled at attempting to win elections. And elections are won on mathematics. I had Mrs. Mays at School 87, so I understand mathematics. Mm-hmm. So Republicans, in order to win, devised the Southern strategy under Nixon.
Under Nixon, yes.
Before then, there was Herbert Hoover with his white movement. In order to attract white voters to win elections, to win national elections.
But what does that imply, though, John? The Southern strategy, which is the Southern strategy, does it imply that Republicans could not secure black votes or the Southern strategy did it have a racial tint to it that going back to the Willie Horton commercials under Bush and Dukakis?
Those are all triggers to generate a big turnout for white people who are going to support the Republican Party. I was in D.C. in '88, and the guys who developed the Teeter poll spoke to us, our group out of Indiana, and it was a national group, and said if you increase the black vote in the United States by 10%, you can control Congress. Republicans didn't want to do that, because if we attract 10% of the black vote, we're going to lose 30% of the white vote. That's just America. That's just where we live. That's what you're seeing today. I couldn't recommend anybody to go vote for the Republican Party in general today. It's not even a Republican Party. It's a Trumpstonian party. But in winning elections, it's mathematics. There have been efforts by the Republicans to go after black votes. I think now we're hitting about 12%. I think even the Trumpster got 12% of the black vote. But nothing, even with affirmative action, fair housing, black appointments, Colin Powell, you can go down the list. It never generated the black vote above that certain level. So Republicans go after a win. What is it? What to me is embarrassing now is, it's not a traditional Republican party. It is a party that now is going all out to lie, cheat, and steal to win.
Okay. Annette, is the perception of the Republican Party racist?
I mean, I would say in various areas. I mean, when you're out talking to individuals and you're out, trying to educate your community on, the importance of voting, and, those type of issues come up. They feel like, the Republicans do a poor job in the area of poverty.
Okay.
They do a poor area in the area of crime and in housing, those type of programs that are pretty much very important to African Americans and Democrats as far as, keeping, people in their homes and not discriminating against them in various areas. To me, they feel like that's where the Republican Party falls short of in those particular areas.
Deputy Mayor Olgen Williams, keep calling me Deputy Mayor Olgen. That whole concept, and Annette talked about the concept when it comes to the areas of poverty, crime, education, housing, all of those issues that, the Republicans don't do as good a job when it comes to connecting to Black America as the Democratic Party. How do you see that?
She's right. Physical conservatives, like John said, they feel they can get votes by not supporting those programs. But they understand the voter that majority of those programs support. Majority of the people on programs are Caucasian.
Right.
the numbers, most of them are Caucasian, taking advantage of the same program. It's not black programs, they say, but they think it is. But I agree with what she's saying. But I think Republicans don't have some benefits being physical conservatives. I look back when this city itself, when we were in, out of the 11, 12 cities, we were one of the better ones when it comes to fighting crime, infrastructure improvement. The other 10 ran by Democrats. But I think we try to do some of those things that Annette said and listen to people. When you get somebody that listens, no matter Republican, Democrat, things can happen. And people think that when you go against any kind of poverty program, any kind of housing, that you're racist. Because we, for some reason, we think black people are the only poor people in the country. And so when you go against anything to help poor people, you got to be racist. Well, that's the perception I think it's going to been promoted over the decades through the media and through what politicians, of course, are said, and that's the thing that's got to stop. And the Republicans need help on that. They need to realize that people do need help, and these programs need to be funded in a way. We give, right now, we help everybody, from Ukraine to Latinos to Israel to you name it, but we still struggling, and black people realize that. We still have issues, and we don't see Republicans doing anything about it. But I don't see Democrats doing anything about it either. So if I had my way, we'd all be independents, But she's right, though. That's perception. And perception is sometimes bigger than the reality of the truth. But low information voters, I think, have, and people got to research. I know they don't have time. Who's doing what for what? Who's doing, how much money are they bringing into your community? And I'm saying, whatever we help people with this bailout, even they did the other day, yesterday, we paying for that. We paying for that. That's tax dollar. I don't have a student loan, but I got to pay for somebody else's now. So those things are just as bad as other stuff. So it's just about the policies, and we don't know policies. Black people don't know policies as well as they should, and that helps. And I think we don't do a good enough job of telling them about policies.
Well, let's deal with the policies a little bit. For those who may be joining us right now, this is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and we're dealing with the issue of Black America and the Republican and Democratic Party. One of the hot issues that's been a hot issue for decades is the whole issue of welfare, and there are two particular viewpoints on welfare. It's been good for us, and it hasn't been good for us. What's the difference in how Black Republicans look at welfare versus Black Democrats when we talk about that issue? Has welfare been good for us? Have we really benefited from that? And are there different viewpoints on an issue like welfare? We can get into education. We're going to get into the Black family and crime. But let's deal with welfare. Are there any difference between, particularly what many Black conservatives say about the issue of welfare, has it been good for us, versus that of Black Democrats?
I think it's been good for a little Teddy that's hungry. He don't have no food, and his mother don't have any way to get anything on the table. I think it helps that individual for sure. And my father died when I was about 10 years old. And my mother raised my sister and I on a Social Security check. Okay. That's it. And did a little hair on the side. So if you can help, yeah, it's good. It's have its point. But we set it up for people to stay on it. It should be a stepping stool or stepping stone for them to be able to be self-sufficient. And we haven't pushed that enough. I think it's good. People need help. Understand? My work or life. People, they need help. Right. Everybody, and welfare, the guy in Elwood, Indiana needs welfare, the lady, just as much as they do in Hallville. Right. And sometimes, but it should be a stepping stone for them to be able to be self-sufficient. And we have done a terrible job. And then white America that may be a little bit more fluent, it's pushed to them, the white people. That's your money helping these poor people. You made it. You understand? There have been challenges and still challenges to the African American community. The playing ground is still not equal. Right. We still don't get hired. We still get laid off first, etc. So to be our stepping stool got to be a little higher than the Caucasian because they don't have the same challenges that white America puts in our way. But we do need those type of programs. And when a nation don't help its poor, it's a sad nation. And we have poor people in our community, in Hallville, East Side. They need help. Now, do they need help through all their lives? No, there's got to be more accountability to these type programs. We haven't done a good job of that.
Trustee Johnson, what do you think about that? Has welfare been helpful or hasn't it, over the last, let's say 40 years?
And, I have to kind of agree with Olgen Williams on that. It has been helpful. It has its advantages. But I think where we have problems in is accountability. Even as a trustee in a township, I see this on a daily basis. Of course, we want to help people. But I want it to be where we help people and not just have continuation of handouts. Because when we do that, we're pretty much, enabling, we're the problem, because we're going to have all these programs that are put in place, and we should have programs put in place for individuals if they need it. I can relate to Olgen as well. My mom and dad were married young. Unfortunately, my dad died when I was 10. So my mom was widowed with 6 kids. Can you imagine at 35 years of age,
wow.
Being widowed with 6 kids? Again, programs were put in place and she was able to apply, but it wasn't where she's part of the system for the duration.
Right.
She knew. And maybe because she had a different type of mindset, and that's what we have to educate our people too. You have to have a different type of mindset. You're not just going to get welfare for the rest of your life. It's just a helping stone to get you where you need to be. And so I'm living proof of that. My mom used it for a small duration till she was able to get back on her feet. She had individuals there to make sure you go back to school, you get you a better education, a college degree where you can make more money, and then you can take care of your family. And that's how she did it. And then from there, even me, I benefited from it. My father was in the military, so I was able to get the pension for 4 years. You go to college,
right.
And it was a free college, degree, because again, my father was in the military. But I didn't use, the welfare program to say, woe is me, and I'm just going to stay on it. I know I had to pick myself up. We have to keep moving. So I think we need to do a better job of accountability, of these programs. We have to, of course, as overseer of programs, should be held accountable for them. But we got to do a better way of making sure the individuals understand. And as taxpayers, you're right, we're paying for this. But how do we get them to understand it's not a continuation for the rest of your life?
John, it's been generational for many, Black families in America where, grandma was on it, mom's on it, the daughter, granddaughter's on it, and it's been generational. What is the Republican viewpoint, Black Republican viewpoint on this issue of welfare that may differ from Democrats' view on the best approach? Or is it the same?
You just heard it.
Okay.
You just heard it. Black conservatives would say there ought to be time limits on housing. There ought to be time limits on welfare. Inside those time limits, there should be, as each individual, my buddies said, there ought to be tools to help you get up and get out, whether it's schooling, training, assistance, financial, counseling, whatever, but that the safety net should not be a permanent safety net. You just heard from 2 outstanding individuals in the community, very bright, give the Black conservative view for the welfare.
The Black conservative view.
And I got one little quick thing I got to toss in.
Okay.
Your last question was, is the Republican Party racist?
Right.
Are you telling me, Pastor, that there are no racists within the Democrat Party?
Well, that's not the perception. Now, we didn't make the argument whether there were, but the perception is that the Republican Party is racist and white Democrats are not racist. Now, I would not say that's true, but that is the perception which is used against Republicans to garner large numbers of Black votes in elections.
70 million people voted for the Trumpster. There's not 70 million Republicans anywhere in this world. I rest my case.
You rest your case. well, part of the other issue too. I think the issue of crime. Let's talk about crime, education, crime and violence, education, and the Black family. Are there real differences from the Black conservative viewpoint on crime and violence, education, and the black family than that of Democrats, whether they be moderate Democrats or a more progressive Democrats? Are there real differences in the viewpoints, in those three areas? Certainly they're critical, in our community. When we talk about the black family, what has happened to the black family, over the last 50 years, education, and this issue that we're facing in urban cities across the country, this high rise of crime and violence, which has led to, and you really can talk about the whole issue of criminal justice reform too, which may be, causing some of the surges that we're seeing in violence across the country in the different perspectives. So do you see, and I kind of open it up to all three of you, are there real differences in how black conservatives who may be more Republican and black Democrats like me and Annette, when it comes to the issue of criminal justice reform, crime and violence, education, and the black family? Anybody want to take that?
I think I'll start off with it. I would say, as a progressive Democrat, because that's what I call myself, progressive, and that's what I pretty much run on and stand on. I want some, again, accountability in our party. I mean, I do want to be supportive of programs. I do want to be. But
you sound like a moderate Democrat or somewhat of a conservative.
Well, the progressive portion of it is that I'm out. I want to be, I want as many of us that are out in the community,
right,
sharing what we can do to make some changes and hopefully, get, our Democratic team that's been used to doing something a certain way, a certain, time and place, that they can progressively say, let's make some changes so that we can have some better outcomes. You just said it, even with the voting. I mean, we get relaxed. You got the same percentage of individuals that's going to go to the ballot box and vote for the same people. But, as a progressive, we want to see a surge in that. We want individuals to understand that we got to make some changes in the area of crime and how the penal system is operated. You have individuals that commit a crime and it's relaxed, I would say, on the sentencing. And then they're back out in the community, and then they do it again in the next couple of years. And to me, that's just not a fair way to run the penal system. We have to somehow crack down on, crime through sentencing. And I'm not saying you just lock everybody up and you throw away the key, but it has to be, we have to come to the medium and figure out how we can make this work. Because if not, you're just going to have a revolving door, and that's what we're pretty much starting to see, those numbers rise up.
Deputy Mayor Olgen, those issues that we just talked about, somewhat of the conservative viewpoint, and I would argue in listening to Trustee Johnson that she's pretty moderate to somewhat conservative in her viewpoints when it comes to criminal justice, when it comes to crime and violence, when it comes to education and the black family. What are the real differences, and why are we having a hard time between black conservatives and black progressives or liberals in finding common ground?
Well, you use the word conservative, so if you put that as on Democrat or Republican, they're going to be about the same, because they're conservatives, at the end of the day. The difference, I guess, is, I don't know if there's any difference. When it comes to law and order and safety, they basically believe, most people believe the same thing, believe it or not.
Okay.
What has happened, the media has shown us the tragic incidents with African Americans in the police, African American and engaging other majority race people. And so we want more leniency, we think. We got too many sons and daughters that are incarcerated, and we think the percentage is probably lopsided. And the problem is not the police problem so much. The problem is at the bench, where they are sentenced, what they're charged, what's the program, diversion programs.
Mm-hmm.
You take a black kid, he goes to juvenile penalty, and a white kid goes down to some farm and milk cows and same crime. Those are issues. One is going to be educated for a possible vocation in the future. One is going to be educated in proper vocation in crime. That's the problem right there. And I think enough conservatives don't look at it in the proper way. They see crime,
right,
and they've been brainwashed too about crime.
Right.
I live in Hallville, USA. We don't have probably no more crime than most people. My kids got in trouble, a couple of them, not real serious. I got in trouble. So, but I'm a law and order guy.
Right.
Because the police hit John Doe in the head with a nightstick and it was wrong, that don't mean I don't want law and order. I want Officer Friendly to go get charged. I still want law and order. I think the guy, my neighbors are Democrats, but we want that same thing.
Okay.
When it comes to crime and law and order. But we as black people in the conservative, we understand that it's not a fair, the ground is not equal, the playing field is not set when it comes to certain parts of the judicial system.
Okay.
Even when you got black judges.
Right.
Just a disparity in high sentences and everything. So that's why I look at the problem here. But when it comes to crime, law and order, I think, and then when it comes to education, that's a different piece too. Also, I think that conservatives look at and they look at the same thing. We say conservative. Most conservatives, how do you find a Democrat conservative and a black conservative, a Republican conservative and a Democrat? What's the definition? Is there a different definition for them too? I don't know. If you just use the word conservative for the basic root meaning, it shouldn't be no difference. But I think these names or these titles, these adjectives thrown out are not true. Okay. That's the problem. They're not true. I consider myself a conservative. I'm probably conservative more than most people. Right. The person I worked for, Mayor Ballot, he was more of a moderate Republican, but I was more conservative than he was. Right. On issues. Yeah. On issues, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I don't know. Depending on what, that's why I don't like titles. I'm a conservative. I'm a conservative guy. Like Trustee Annette, she said she was progressive. What is a progressive?
I want to move forward. I want to move the needle forward.
Yeah, in a conservative manner.
Having it staying in
you said, well, in a conservative manner. Yeah. because part of what doesn't happen is that we don't have these kind of conversations with one another when I think there are a lot of areas that we are in agreement on. Yeah. This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. And I have with me Olgen Williams, Annette Johnson, and John Howell. John, what do you think? Are we more in line with one another than we think, or are there real differences between black Democrats and black Republicans? We use the term moderates, conservative. Are we more in line, or are there real differences?
Well, there are definitely real differences, but I think Olgen and Annette described how it can flow similar to each group: black conservatives, black Democrats who are progressive. Olgen lives in the core city, so do I, and we want law and order. We want safety, right? And so our view, I don't think our view is going to be that much different than Annette's. In the fact that I'm not interested in the prosecutor letting killers and rapists and burglars come back and stay next door to me. Right. I'm not interested in that. Right. Now if you got programs that can work with people, I'm for that. But I think our conservative piece blends in. However, black conservatives have been pariahs in the community. There's nobody seeking us out for dialogue, right. and so this it's not something that is going to happen tomorrow. That progressives and conservatives are sitting down talking about an agenda, because that's really what we ought. That's really the bottom line of the political agenda. African Americans ought to have pieces of an agenda that they need to get done in order to improve the quality of life for black people in America. But
I articulated on television everything that basically John, you said what Annette said, what Olgen said, and in doing so, a lot of times, I certainly become the target, of community activists and other black preachers, but it's from that conservative, democratic, moderate background, where I grew up, where there has to be some accountability. And even in our communities, our neighborhoods, we want some law and order. I just think that we can do better, and that better was expected of us growing up. Those of us who I'm a '60s baby, so I come, born in the 1960s, and there was accountability, expected from our parents and grandparents. There was, a code of behavior that was demanded, and it was not optional, not just from our family, from the larger community. But when we begin to talk about those things now, accountability, it tends to create a firestorm that we're putting black people down somehow, that we are attacking young people, that, part of the criticism of me, I don't like young people because I call for accountability. I'm just calling for accountability, and I expect if Annette is living in a nice neighborhood in Pike Township, then John Hall ought to in Riverside, Olgen ought to live in that same kind of environment, and Charles Harrison ought to live in my family in that same kind of neighborhood, by the fairgrounds. And I don't think people in the suburbs ought to have anything different from those of us who may live in the urban core. And I think that's Agreed. Behind it. But we don't seem to be able to have a conversation. Okay, what's best? How do we improve education in the black community? How do we improve and help black families? How do we really deal with the crime and violence issue without us being tagged as being enemies of one another, rather than all of us having different perspectives on how do we address these critical issues that face our community?
That's where the difference really lies, on that approach that you're talking about now. Conservatives would probably say you got to reach that family unit in order to improve the education, the quality of life for black families. Others in our community would say, no, it's the racism, it's the structural racism, it's other factors that are impacting black families. That's one of the big differences.
So the issue of racism, structural racism versus, for the family. The family component. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I'm agreeing with John Hall. That's where you see it, where we're divided. Again, the instructional, like you said, racism, and then the family component. Like, how do we, get the families connected with, as far as raising their kids and accountability, rules, regulations. I mean, there's a good article in the Star News today about this increase of violence in teen age. So teens, from last year, it's went up tremendously.
Dramatically, yes.
With teens being victim of gun violence.
Right.
So there you have it right there. If this is teens are, getting more involved in killings or in shootings and are dying at the handguns amongst their own peers, to me, that shares it right there. That's the family component.
So you would say, and all of you, is that not a family issue? I mean, I have two teenagers, raised two are still at home. I would see that as my issue that I have to address. Is not the issue of government, is not the issue of the school system or law enforcement. It's my issue as a parent in trying to deal with Jeremiah and Jalen.
Watch out, Pastor.
And my wife, me and Fawn. Exactly. That's how I see it.
Well, if you read the article that's in the newspaper today, I mean, you're reading the article and it talks about the teens, juveniles that have been involved in the shootings and the killings. This had nothing to do with the police officers. These were teens that were out in different capacities, and they're whatever they did, their day-to-day evening function or night function at parties and so forth. So you're not going to have a police officer at a party. So it had nothing to do with a police officer. These are teens, their upbringing, again, the family structure, whatever's going on, the dynamics in that family. And if you read the articles, that's what it's talking about. This had nothing to do with police shootings or anything like that. These are just teens out, hopefully supposed to be having a good time. A fight breaks out. The first thing they do is pull out a weapon, a gun, and they kill the other teen.
But I guess the issue is if I have two teenage children, then is it my response? First of all, they have boundaries and they have a curfew. So if my son has a gun, whose responsibility is that to address that if my son is trying to get a hold of a gun? Is it the school's responsibility? Is it the community's responsibility? Or is it my responsibility as a parent? And I guess we can't have those conversations in the Black community without there being a fight, over that issue about why are we now having so many teens with guns, and now they're settling their conflicts with each other with violence.
Well, lots of meetings I go to, if not 85% of them, when they talk about solutions, people, first thing they throw out, it's the families. It's the families. They see these teens. I mean, I agree. First teacher is the family, the parent, But the structure of the family is built. When I was coming up, a gentleman was coming in there, younger than we are. Let me use this analogy. Our family structure was built off stone. The family structure is now built on sand because of the deterioration of the education system when it comes to educating our children how to go to the next level. The education system, as we know it, I'm going to say that is a complete failure. As charter schools, charter public, local public, when you got that, see, they trick us. What's your graduation rate, charter school? We got a 95% graduation. That's 95% of seniors. You go to the 8th grade, it's more like 40%. If you start the 9th grade, John, bring them up. It's a fact. When you don't get an education in America, you're going to have what? Lots of challenges. Lots of things you can't do. And therefore, and you go home with some popcorn and some Kool-Aid and look at the basketball game, all they're going to tell you is look at all these things you can buy with money. I don't have an education. I can't go to the apprentice program. I can't make $25. Allison won't hire me. So how am I going to get to buy those how am I going to get to buy them pretty things I see in TV? Somebody's going to tempt me and say, come on, man. The lie. Going to buffoon them and trick them. Now, who's failing it? When I was working at Christmas House, I had parents that were scared to go to the school to talk to the teacher because of their experiences with the teachers. They dropped out. They was treated bad. And I had to be an advocate for them. We have to improve the education system, not only the children, but of the parents, because so many of them, it failed them. When you graduate and can't read, John's a teacher, it cuts your challenges out. I had 10 children. They lived in Harvard, USA. They went to Ben Davis, and the first responsibility for me to get them there was Olgen Williams, not the pastor. Right. Nobody. Right. I used to tell them, they said, I'm your parents. Bishop Harris, your pastor. Right. There's a difference. That's right. I'm going to pastor you. I'm going to make sure I do my job. Now, how did that happen? I was taught by the single mother, Irene Williams. Hey. Don't you hang around him.
But you done
He's smoking that dope. I don't want to see you around him. Right. Now, I was doing my bad stuff, but something I didn't do. Not because the community was telling. But now, it's just like
smorgasbord.
I can't do nothing with him. Right. Wait a minute, you can't do nothing with it. Well, again, they could do something with me because the system wouldn't get in the way. Right. I go to the school, they won't say, well, Mr. Williams, you can't touch him in school. We're gonna call him, How you call me to straighten my son? They called me to straighten my son out one day. He's smart as a whip. He thinks he's smart teacher. I had an umbrella in my hand. It was raining. The English teacher couldn't take it. Best English teacher, black, they headed to school. Well, I just hit him side of the head with the umbrella. And she said, well, you can't do that, Mr. Williams. I said, you called me, didn't you? I guarantee you, he straightened up. She had no more problems out of it. You can't do that now, though.
Oh, no, we can't.
Now, I didn't hurt him, man.
Yeah.
I didn't hit him hard. But education system is failing. The education system is failing the African American community like 40 going west.
Right.
We can not longer let our children come out, because we can't. I'm a big proponent on paying teachers good money if they're able to qualify to be a good teacher. That got to be some kind of testing system, whatever. You go in these schools now, you don't see no black men. Mm-hmm. Like John. I tell you, John's student was talking about him at VA Hospital. Oh, how John, Mr. Hall helped me get out of trouble, and he got a good job at VA. I mean, this is years, decade. You don't see it, but its first responsibility is on. Let me say this again. My children could not bring in a pencil, a eraser, without me asking, where did you get that?
That's right.
I knew exactly what I bought them.
That's right.
And what we could do. They can bring to my, that's John's shoes. We swapping shoes. Now, you don't swap shoes in here. You better take them back.
You sound like my wife.
I don't play that. Cause I don't know what they doing, see?
Yes.
And my kids were no angel. They was fighting in the Howellville and doing it, but they wasn't in no games because they was more afraid of me.
Right.
Amen.
But I think they're more afraid of Mary, my wife, than me. Because when she did the corporal punch, and she didn't know how to stop.
There you go.
But I'm saying it goes to the home.
Yes.
I believe that.
Yes.
And I think the church has a good part in it. If the preachers stop preaching politics and preach about the quality of life and the responsibility of what we should be doing as parents in education. And then I think, the next thing is the education system is failing us. And there's no cure-all in charter school. Let me say that. That ain't the answer. The answer is more parental involvement. And how do we do that when a house is built on sand? Well, I guess we got to put something. We just got to get involved and help. Some way we got to help our families to get stronger and to be able to raise their children up in a manner that they see like it's right. And I'm not trying to raise nobody's children, but we know there's some right and wrong they should have. When children got Glocks in their book bags standing out there, and we as a community don't get along. We don't get along about some Glocks in a book bag. That's not a crisis in our community. And we sitting around here talking about something that ain't got no value to quality of life. We got a problem.
Well, this has been just an awesome conversation today. And I want to thank Olgen Williams and Annette Johnson and John Hall for joining me today. And it seemed to me that in the midst of us Democrats and Republicans, that there was a lot of common ground in this conversation and dialogue today that I wish we could do on a local level, on the state level, and on a national level. And I think that if we were able to do that, we could come up with some real tangible solutions to help make Black America better and make both political parties more beneficial. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and this has been Real Talk. Join me next time as I bring you more real talk about the real issues that affect our communities here in Indianapolis and across the country. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast and share it on Facebook and Twitter. I pray that you have a blessed and wonderful day. This is Reverend Harrison. Peace.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.